Welcome everybody to the Mylio Photos Coffee Break. My name is Angela Andrieux and I'm a product evangelist for Mylio Photos. Today I'm joined by Osiris Indriya. He's our marketing team lead, and he's going to talk with us a little bit about folders and how they relate to the folders you see in your file system versus in Mylio, and how to keep things tidy and organized. So welcome, Osiris. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me again, Angela.
Anytime.
So I'm much less of a photography nerd as what was going on prior to the kickoff of this, but what I am very much is a data and privacy nerd. Before I came to Mylio, I was very concerned about the way that the internet was going, that streaming services were going to own all of our data, cloud services were going to own everything, and then they could just take it away at any time or do whatever they wanted with it, whether it was gather information about us or whatever. And I'm sure some of us have already experienced like TV shows and movies being moved around and not being where you want them all the time. It's definitely somewhat come true, maybe not as bad as I had feared. But when I got invited to work at Mylio in 2015, I was really excited to be a part of a group of people working to keep your data where you want it to be. And if you want it to be in the cloud, great. And if you want it to be local, you can keep it local. And understanding the way Mylio works with files is definitely a big part of that local component of Mylio that I love so much. So let's start with our goals for today. So I'm going to keep it pretty light and not go into really advanced features, but just explore how to work with folders. So we're just going to start with navigation. We're going to be looking at the top level folders view, which is different from any other folder view. And then we're going to show how to traverse through folders to find things. I also have the ability to show on mobile. I have my iPad handy, so we're going to look at that as well. We're also going to look at managing files and folders. So folder and file naming. There's a lot of different ways to do that. So I'm happy to hear other options, but I'm going to propose a few ways that I do it. How to move files and folders, and then editing folders using the details panel. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. We're going to go over that in a moment. And then at the end, my favorite part is going to be using the Mylio Photos clipboard. It's something I use constantly. It's super cool. It's a feature I didn't know that I needed until I figured out how to use it, and now I can't imagine living without it. So we'll spend a little bit of time with that too. And it's not the standard clipboard, just like the copy paste command on an operating system. It's definitely a unique feature that I haven't seen elsewhere. So let's start with navigating the folders. So let's go to the top level view of folders in Mylio. So I have my personal library here. If you double click on this folders tab, it will show you all of your top level folders on each device. So you can see here, this is the local library here on this machine. I also have a linked folder on this computer. So it says Mac Studio, but it's my pictures folder. So what that means is this folder is just part of the operating system. It's the pictures folder. I've told Mylio to keep that in mind when it's doing all of its syncing and managing of files. So I can view that here. I can also view that and interact with it on any device. So I have the pictures folder from my MacBook Pro. And then you'll see I have a number of folders with some nice funny faces on my iPhone. And that's partially because my iPhone has been probably the most consistent device I've had, even though I do replace iPhones about once a year because I love to have the latest and greatest. But the iPhone has been following me along with Mylio since 2015 as far as a destination or a location. So what's really important to notice about everything in this view is that the devices don't have to be on and online for me to access them. So for example, right now, the MacBook Pro is not, Mylio is not open, is not running, and yet I can still open this up and see everything that I've added from here. So in my specific case, I've been doing a ton of scanning lately, and I've been using my laptop to go to where the scanner is instead of having the scanner in my messy office where my desktop is. And so all of those photos are here, but I can still access them as if they're here, even though that device is off because of Mylio syncing. And this device here that we're looking at, the Mac Studio, is set to auto optimize, even though I have quite a bit of space, though. You can kind of see here it's mostly full. But it's not full from Mylio, it's full from other things. I definitely am in favor of any viewing device being set to auto optimize, which is just the default when you install and start using Mylio. And I use external hard drives and Amazon Cloud as my vaults to do backup. All right, so that's that top level folder view. So you can kind of see what I was already doing to navigate. On a computer, you single click to select a folder, and then you double click to open the folder. So these don't even necessarily look like folders. But Mylio has a very visual way of showing you everything that you have. In fact, let's go back here. See if I do this right. Nope, I did that wrong. If I'm holding the control button right now and scrolling, so that's adjusting my sizing here. That's what I was trying to do. If I hold the shift key down and I scroll with my mouse, this is something called Flutter. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but if you want to peek inside a folder to see what's in there, you can flip through it really quickly by holding that shift key down and scrolling. So the key to that is you click once to select it and then start scrolling. That's a pretty...
So a couple of cool tips on that is if you're on a mobile device, all you have to do is flick your finger across a folder and album to Flutter. And if you have a touchpad on a laptop or a gesture sensitive mouse, you can just do right to left movements on those as well to use the Flutter.
Yeah, that was a really early feature that Mylio has had forever that rarely gets discussed. So I figured it's a good time to plug it.
It's a fun one and it's really quite useful.
It is. So then if I want to go in again, so I've clicked to select it, I double click to get inside, and then to go back out, you can hit the escape key, which is what I just did, or you can use this back button. This back button is definitely your friend. So if I go in again, so you can see these are all nested folders within folders.
Well, and a great way to tell that is looking at the annotations in the upper left corner of each box. You can see that some of them just have a number and some of them have a little folder icon and another number. That first number represents how many images are inside that folder. And if they're subfolders, that's what the second number represents.
So in these, what I was doing very recently in my scans, you'll see a lot of these have two folders. It's because many of them have the original raw scans and then some automatic restored. I just started using the Epson Fast Photos 680W, I think it is. And it has a really nice automatic restoration feature where it'll help recover colors and things like that. But once you're all the way in, so now I'm at the deepest level in the folder, you'll see it looks a lot like the all photos view typically looks. It's just showing me everything that's inside this particular folder. And then again, I can do escape to go back out. But if I don't want to keep escaping out, I can also double click folder to get back up to the top. So on mobile, it's a little bit different. So this is a little bit of an experiment here. So here's my iPad. So on the iPad, to select, because if I just tap with a single tap, it opens it. So if I want to select the folder, you actually long tap. So now I've got this one selected. And then this little menu pops up here. So what range does, if I click range, I don't know if it's going to work in this particular view. Let's try, oops. How did this happen? I don't know what's going on with that. Okay, I guess I lost it there.
Try
Sorry,
again.
try again. Oh, oh well, I may have lost it for good there. We don't want to troubleshoot that right now. Sorry about that.
And that's not a Mylio problem. We're using a third-party app to share our mobile devices to the computer when we do those kind of demos. And it doesn't always work 100% perfectly.
Yeah, that's what just happened there.
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, but generally you tap and hold to select, and then at the bottom you saw there was the range and then the done. So when you're done selecting, you would hit done, and that clears the selection. So if there's anything you want to do to a selected range of folders, you would, you can either, once you long tap, you can individually tap them, or you can click range to get start at the beginning and start at the end and select everything in between. So it's definitely a little different, but it's really awesome that Mylio allows you to manage your files on the go, even when you're offline. So you can actually reorder, you can structure, you can rename, you can delete things that are actually being deleted from a mobile device, and it will be reflected in your operating system, which is pretty awesome. Oops. And then again, back button is the escape key, or the back arrow there. So let's go back in. Yeah, so this guy's your friend, or you can always, again, double click to get all the way back up to the top. Nice and basic. So as far as keeping things tidy, so now we know how to get around and find where everything is, and we understand that top level view with all of the linked folder locations. One of the main ways to organize things is through naming. My favorite way to do naming is with dates, and you'll see in a lot of these specific cases, I didn't necessarily do that. But here is an example of times where I've done that. So this was everything that happened on this specific date. So it has the year, the month, and then the day. And the main reason you do that, again, being a little basic here, but it's just if you alphabetize them, they're going to be in chronological order automatically, which is the default setting in most cases for views both in Mylio and in your file system. If you start with the month, then all of your Octobers are going to be together regardless of year. So that's not as helpful. If you start with the day of the month, then that's going to be even worse. But if you start with year, then month, then day, then you get a nice natural sequential order. So sometimes I don't know the exact long dates. So again, using year first for all these scans, I was reading the photo albums and entering in the years. And what's really fun for the Epson fast photos, it actually encourages you to do that in its UI. So if you're going to ever use that awesome scanner, it encourages that year first naming by default for folders and for files. So in these, if I look at these, I'm going to pop open, getting a little ahead of myself, the info panel here. You can see that the file name still has those years, and then they're incremented. So that's definitely generally a good rule of thumb. What's great about that is if you ever threw a bunch of files together from many different folders, let's say you're creating a slideshow or you're creating a folder that you want to send to somebody, if they're all using the date naming system, they're going to be in chronological order again, if they are sorted alphabetically. Definitely a good way to do it. I just want to talk about spaces versus dashes versus underscores as well. And I'm sure there are people here with differing opinions on this, but in modern operating systems, spaces don't tend to matter as much as they used to. They used to be problematic. They're not so problematic. The main reason to use dashes versus underscores and spaces is if you're a key command user like me, where you hold command to select or things like that, and you use your arrow keys, dashes and spaces break up words. according to the operating system. The underscore kind of links them as one thing. So if like you're double clicking to select and there's an underscore, those things are continuous. So it all becomes a single unit. So sometimes I'll use the underscores for dates, so it's a single unit, and then I'll use a dash before some words maybe, if I want them to be separated. I tend to not use spaces just because I'm using habits from the past, but generally speaking, spaces don't really matter. Mylio definitely works fine with spaces and file names. And then I generally avoid using any punctuation in file names and folders. Again, modern operating systems tend to be okay with that. And like even Windows can deal with a gazillion periods in a file name, as long as the last period is the file type ends there at the end and you're not putting something else. But still, I would rather avoid any problems with file names that can come from using special characters. And then in Mylio, if you like any of this approach, you can actually do some of this from the menu here. If I can find where that is. Do I have to select a folder? I rarely do this, but there we go. More folder actions. So I've selected a folder, and you can actually use Mylio to reorganize your folders using a naming scheme of your choice, or just rename the files. So reorganizing the folders is something where you can create year, month, year, or day organization. You create your custom. This gets a little deep, but
I'll
if you
put a
want to
link
have
into
really
the manual,
granular
so if somebody
control,
wants to read more about that, they can dive in. There's a few factors there to consider, but it's really not difficult, but I'll give you some more information on that.
yeah. It's the same kind of system that happens during import. So if you're exporting, if you're exporting, it often asks you what you want your file names to be, especially if you're exporting any kind of multiples. Single file, it's not as big of a deal, but if you're doing multiple files, it can say, hey, I want to use a custom string, a custom name with numbers at the end, and it will increment them up for you. So if you have 5 pictures, it'll start with 1 and number them to 5, which is really handy. This is something you can do after the fact. So if you want to redo that on a folder, so that's here in the more folder actions. Sorry, if I select first, so it's this little menu down here, your actions menu. Why don't I see it? There it is. More folder actions. Right. So now there's moving. We've got everything in there. So this happens more or less how you might expect it to. So in this folder, I actually left it where the original and the restored are all mixed together still. So this is not how I want it, because I want to be able to export a folder of all the restored or all the raw in a while. Oh, I see a hand from Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, this goes back to your renaming issue.
Yeah.
When I migrated from Lightroom, in Lightroom, all my photos were stored by year only, and it wasn't very convenient. So instead of linking Mylio up to my existing photo file structure, I copied it, and I copied it into year, month, day, which I like a whole lot better. The downside to it is when you want to do renaming, it reinitiates the sequence count. If you put a sequence count in, it reinitiates it for every folder, which in my case is a day. So to get around it, you got to use the search thing and select a range of dates, like maybe a month or a year, whatever you want to do, and then say rename. You can do it, but it took a little jumping around to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really a good idea to start with small batches of photos if you're going to use that renaming, just so you can see exactly what the effects are. And again, there's great documentation in the manual too. So definitely check that out first and then test it on a small batch to see if you like the results. You could even copy a folder, duplicate it, so then you're messing with one and keeping the original the way it was. So this, for moving stuff around, so you can select individual files. You can hold the Control or Command key on a Mac to select several. And then I'm right clicking and I can even move, for example, into a new folder that I'm going to call Restored. And then create. So you can see now that all the loose images that are not in this new subfolder are now beside the folder. So if I come here and select the ones that I know I want to move, I can go move to folder, go up a level. So this is the back or up. Oops, that was not already where I wanted to be. How did that happen? It's remembering my last navigation. Oops, sorry. Let's start this over. Wow, that's way out there.
Yeah, it does tend to like to go to
There we
the
go.
last one that you used.
Oops, is that the one I wanted? Pictures, this guy. Here we go. So I'm in the wedding anniversary. Restored. Sorry, that was a little longer than I'd hoped. So those guys moved out. And you can now see that they're here. And I'm going a little fast maybe. So you can also right click into the negative space to create another folder where I might say these are the raw scans. This is how I'm doing it. This is not particularly descriptive, but that's because I'm using the parent folder to separate these. So what this is again helping me do in the long run, you can see that I have a bunch of other folders already set up this way, is now I can just very easily export the folder with one or the other. So if somebody wants the raw scans specifically because they want to do their own enhancement on it, I wouldn't want to necessarily give them the modified version. So that's why I'm keeping both. Again, that's a really nice functionality of the Epson scanner, that I get to have both at the same time automatically.
Another cool feature of that scanner is, depending on how you have it set up, it'll also automatically scan the backs of photos. So you might have noticed there were a couple in one of these folders that had the back of a photo with some writing. He didn't have to scan that individually. The fast photo recognizes that there's text on the back and will automatically scan it. So you have that information to add that in. And it's also, as long as it's legible to Mylio, Mylio can read that text as well. So then that becomes searchable.
Yeah. So it'll detect any kind of things that look like writing, which is fun.
Yep.
And actually, just to show that, because this is related to naming, it does a really cool thing with the name. Since I have this details panel open, the restored versions, it always adds an A to, and if there's a back, it adds a B. So you can actually even look for anything that has an _B to get all the backs, for example, which is super handy. Or find all the photos that have a back. Pretty cool. All right, so we already got into the details panel. I don't know if you've spent a lot of time in this info world, but it's definitely a great place to be. So one way to change like the file name itself, you can just do it right here in the details panel. So you can see that was updated here. Oh, I don't like that change because I want to be more consistent. You can just type and edit here. It also shows you a lot of good information about what's going on inside that. And one little secret that I wanted to show that maybe people don't know about is down here in the bottom of this list is the don't show in calendar view, which is pretty cool, actually. If there's folders of images, there was 2 years ago, I lost about 60 pounds and I was doing some body progress photos and I didn't really want those in my calendar. That's just for me. So that is something that you can use this don't show in calendar, which will just hide it from that view. And there's actually more coming in our upcoming release. If you have photos like that you would prefer not to be in the main view where people can, where you might be sharing and showing. Like the worst thing is you hand your phone to somebody to show them a group of photos and they start navigating around, right? That happens a lot. So Mylio's got some new features coming to make it so you can actually hide some photos, so they're just not even viewable to you unless you're actually specifically looking for that group that you've hidden. So that's coming very soon. Very excited about that. For now, we do have don't show in calendar. So that's a good start.
Don't show in calendar is really helpful if you have a combination of professional work and personal work. And let's say you want your life calendar to really focus in on your life, not necessarily your professional jobs, like you did some product photography, you did some real estate photography. That's not your house. Those aren't your things that you're photographing. That's for other people. You can hide those folders and still have everything accessible all within one library. I've found that to be very useful.
And in my case, since I have both the raw versions and the restored and they're identical, other than whether or not they're restored, I would maybe want to hide half of them, you know, save those raw scans just in case and enjoy the restored versions or vice versa, depending on my preference. Oh yeah, setting a cover. So that's right here. So every folder has a cover. Now, there are settings for how a cover is chosen, and it's chosen based on how you've interacted with something. So I have it set where if I flag a photo, so if I go in here and let's say I like this one here, and if I go into this rating tab and I flag it, so now when I go up, you'll see that the cover image has changed. And it kind of goes all the way up, like it just keeps following me because I flagged that thing. But let's say I don't want it to follow all the way up. I only want it to impact the folder where I'm at. So I'm going to turn off that flag. And instead, on, let's say, this level of folder, I can change the cover here using what's inside, which is super handy. So let's say now I'm going to like this one. Let's show my grandpa. So now this is set as the cover photo. And if I go up a level, it didn't follow me. It's using the other preferences that I have. So it's a nice way to curate your folder view so you're showing the things that you really want to be showing at each level. So that's right here in the details panel.
You can also do that while you're browsing an individual folder. Right click on a specific image and tell it to set your cover as well.
Mm-hmm.
The set cover by folder, album, or event. There. And then another quick little tip is Osiris showed you Flutter a little earlier. You might notice there's a little pin icon as you're going through on Flutter. That's another quick and easy way to set a cover photo. So there we go. It's a little easier to do on mobile, but if you click that pin, that's going to pin that photo as the cover photo for that folder. And sometimes you have to navigate up a level and back for it to show in the details panel.
Right. Let's see if I missed anything here. Nope, I got all that. So now we're finally onto my bonus tip, which I'm really excited about. This is using the Mylio clipboard. This is what I do the most frequently. And that's why I probably looked a little awkward navigating through doing what I'm doing here, because this is not how I use Mylio. Once I got into the clipboard, that's basically all I do. So often when I'm going through and I'm looking for things, let's say I'm using the filter or the search function, or I come across an image that I'm just interested in, by default, my immediate action is to say, put that into the clipboard. So you'll see what I did is I just click and I drag and I drop it down here. So this is the Mylio clipboard. And you can collect images from a lot of locations and put them all in here together. So let's say I'm trying to curate a slideshow or some images that I want to send to my dad here. I can just choose any group of images from any location I can even go up to the top. Say I want to include, oh, I don't know if I need to show the driver's license there. So I actually put a folder in here. I don't know if you saw that. So now I have a collection of images and a folder. And what you can do with things that are in here is now I can move them all into a new location. Now, if I move them into a new folder, it's going to actually physically move them in the file system, which I actually don't want to do with this group of things. But what I may want to do is create a temporary container for these items without moving them from the folders and not rearranging them in my file structure. So that is the function of an album. So I can create a new album. And then I can drag all of these things in there. So now I have everything in an album and they're still here. So I can actually do other things with it. So let's say I wanted to move it in the file system and I want to create an album and you can keep them there as long as you want, and you can continue to add things to it, and then you can clear it at any time. So because what I did here was create an album, which is non-destructive, I can delete the album. None of the files were deleted. Nothing was moved. I'm back to where I started.
The clipboard has got to be one of my favorite things too. It's incredibly useful. I like to use it for moving things around in albums. I don't use it so much for folders unless I'm, in kind of cleaning mode. And if you're in cleaning mode and you're wanting to kind of organize things, it can be very helpful. So what Osiris did earlier was separating out those raw scans and the optimized ones. The clipboard's a great way to do that too.
Right. So that's exactly the best way that I do this is I go through and I find all the ones that I know are restored because I know what the sequence are, and I like to bring the backs in too. And then I just drop them in here. So now I don't have to make sure that I keep pressing the button correctly to keep selecting things because I've plopped them down here. Now, if I select, oops, I deselected everything, it's not a problem because it's still sitting here down in the clipboard ready for me to continue. Mark, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the most important things about the clipboard for me, and I wasn't comfortable using it myself, and I went screaming for Angela one day for help because I had pictures that weren't categorized properly, and I had different generations of relatives in the same picture, and I was putting those relatives into separate family albums. And if I tried to move it in, okay, first I did a search for pictures that weren't in albums. That's how I got into this. Well, if I move it into an album, then it came off that search. Well, I needed to do it again, and it was gone. So I took that whole set and dropped it into the clipboard, and it's something I would have never figured it out. Even reading the manual, and I did try, I couldn't figure out how to do that. And now that Angela taught me how to do that, the clipboard's much more obvious now to do all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's like your lap or the pile next to your working area. It's the temporary holding space for things that you want to do something with. And you can spend as much time as you want collecting those things together. That's what I love. And it can be several different actions to go around collecting all those things, several different searches, filters, poking around, faces, locations, whatever it is. And then take that collection and do something with it. Generally, for me, it's create an album. But in this specific case, since Epson scanned everything into the same folder, I have to move them manually. And it's actually easier for me to do this in Mylio than it is in the file system. Even though I kind of know by the file names what's going on, this way I can actually see the full image to know that this one's the restored and this one is not. So this is my preferred way to do it. Again, everyone has their own way, but this works really well for me. And that's what I have for today.
So Barbara has a quick question in the chat. She says, how is it different to deal with photos in the clipboard? Just click on each photo, or how do you select within the clipboard? You're absolutely correct. Once you have a group of images in the clipboard, you can select all of them, or you can select individual photos. So if you want to only drag one of those photos into a particular album, you can do them one at a time, or you can grab them as a group.
All right, so now I've got one I moved. I could move.
And she says how to select all. You can just click the first one, hold down the shift key, and then click the last one,
Or
and
you
that'll
can
select
do
all of them.
Control A or Command A actually gets them too.
Now do you have to click down into the clipboard to get that? Because sometimes if you do Control or Command A, would it select everything up in the grid?
It did not for me, but I was just pulling from the clipboard. So I'm sure it was the active part of the user interface.
Yeah, so if you already have one selected in the clipboard, if you do a Command or Control A, that'll get you all of them. I think if you have one selected in the grid, Command or Control A will get you everything in the grid.
And again, when you see a photo grid like this means they are not in a contained folder, and that's okay. You don't need to have everything be it's okay to have a mix of folders and things loose in a folder if that's the way you like to organize. But Mylio does a nice way of collecting these so you know that these are the loose photos and you can click in. So it operates kind of like a container, like a folder, but it isn't.
From this view right here, can you go ahead and do a right click and show in Finder so we can see what that looks like at the file system level?
I need to click an individual image, correct?
Or click one of you can do that
Or a folder, but
folder.
I can't select this.
Right, yeah.
But I can select this. Show in Finder. I'll bring that in.
So what you're seeing here is there's the two folders he has mimic the two folders you're seeing there in Mylio. And then we're only seeing one XMP because those originals are all actually being held probably on a different machine, external drive.
That's right, because they came from my laptop. This is my desktop.
Yep. So
I'm managing all of these files and folders and my laptop is off and I've moved them all around. And the next time Mylio syncs, the original folder that's linked in with Mylio will get reorganized and sorted, which is awesome. And I could do the same thing on mobile, make all these changes, and then the next time that device syncs. And generally speaking, you sync by having at least one device with the changes and one device and the other device that you want to sync to have Mylio on and open at the same time. That's the best way to do that.
Yep. All right, any other questions? Thank you so much, Osiris, for explaining folders and the file system and ways to keep things organized. I think this is very helpful, and I hope everybody took something away from this and got a little bit of extra knowledge. We hope you'll join us for another episode of Mylio Photos Coffee Break. And thank you again, Osiris, for your presentation.